Buen dia a todas e todos. Good morning, everyone. That's a pleasure to be here to open the second webinar on the series of Road to Punta del Este Data Festival. This webinar is organized by the UN Regional Hub for Big Data and Data Science in Latin America and the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. The idea is to showcase what we are doing down here in Latin America and the Caribbean, using big data and data science for statistical production. The last month, we had the first webinar of the series. INERI de Mexico and Dani Colombia have spoken about what they are doing with the use of satellite imagery for statistical production. Today is web scraping for prices, and the next month, I'll tell you the data, 11 October, we will have Paraguay and the Dominican Republic talking about data science in official statistics. I'll not take long. I will pass. Today we have the moderator is Fred Galvis from the Global Partnership. So I will pass you the floor, Fred, to start the webinar of today. Thank you very much, everybody, for accepting being here to speak, and thank you to the audience to be here also for the interest. Fred, that's yours, the floor.
Muchas gracias, Andrea. Cambiamos a español.
Thank you so much, Andrea. We'll switch to Spanish. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us during this webinar. This is the second edition of the webinar, as Andrea mentioned. It is a pleasure for us to be able to provide this possibility to share experiences at the regional level together with the other organizations that are also providing their knowledge for carrying out these three webinars. One in September, next one in October. It's also important to take into account that this is done for the Data Festival. So this is also a call for you to attend an event in early November, from 6th to 9th November in Punta del Este, Uruguay, where we're going to deal with a number of exercises having to do with big data, innovations at NSO, how
Nuevos de capturar información.
Work is being done on a new aspect of capturing information, but also on the use of such information. I think these webinars will also make it possible to create contacts. So if there's some interest from you who are listening to this broadcast, there's also the possibility to reach out to the people in the different countries in order to learn on a one-on-one basis. Without further ado, I'm going to share the screen very quickly. Today we have this webinar, which is focused on web scraping experiences at PPI and prices in general in 3 countries in Latin America. So we're going to have Chile, Brazil, the ABG, and also the Uruguay NSO by dealing with their experiences. Chile, I'm going to introduce the speakers today, and then once that each country is done, we will give the floor to the next country, where we will mention the country and the name of the speaker. You have 15 minutes, so please, those of you want to be speaking, please keep track of time. You have 15 minutes, exactly 15 minutes, so that we can have a Q&A session after your presentation, and we'll also be able to capture new ideas. So during the Q&A, include your questions and answers on chat if you have any questions or comments on the presentations. So we will be paying lots of attention to the chat room. Okay, now we have Christian Copaya from Chile. The title, his presentation is Experiences with Web Scraping at Chile's NSO. He's an economist, a master's in finance. He worked for the NSO from 2008 to 2018. Between 2018 and 2022, he was the head of the CERNAC's Studies Department, and he's currently the head of the NSO's Price Statistics Department. Next presentation, we're going to have our guest from Brazil and Lincoln da Silva, and Ms. Miranda with a presentation called Exploring the Use of Web Scraping for Price Statistics in Brazil. Vladimir leads the team that deals with methodologies and processing for price communication, IBG price indexes, and some interesting topics having to do with alternative data sources and new techniques for price statistics. He's also a member of the UN Department on Web Scraping Data. Lincoln is a statistician on consumer price indexes and is also a professor at the National Science Department at the National University, and he's also worked on the use of alternative sources and we'll have web scraping and APIs for Uruguay's NSO. Sophia is a master in economics, and he's been dealing with automatic prices and also at the Uruguayan National University. Gaston is a master's degree in economics and also an expert in data science. He's also part of the standardization research and projects department. So just 1 minute, we're going to start the presentations and we will give you some time for you to share the experiences in Chile. Please remember, you have 15 minutes.
Agradecer la invitación a presentar nuestra experiencia con
Thank you for the invitation to share our experiences on web scraping. This is quite recent at the Institute, but we've been addressing this topic with lots of effort and very seriously. So let me begin by sharing and also with tourism packages. We've decided to focus on airline tickets because we feel this is a very interesting topic because the number of prices that we have gathered and some of the things that have enabled us to further examine this through our price collection method. First of all, the basics about web scraping. And those of you who are aware of this, please excuse me, but I'm going to go over this very quickly for those who are still insecure about this. So we find these prices on different websites, and the various price departments and statistical operations used to do this manually. There's been a sort of an evolution. First, there was a number, or there were a number of surveys conducted by a number of institutions. They would go to different establishments, business establishments, or just log on to websites for companies in order to compare prices. They would do this manually. And based on web scraping, we've been able to replace that manual component, man hours or person hours, for carrying out this task. Now it's being done in an automated fashion using different tools that are becoming more popular every day. And how do we use web scraping for dealing with airline tickets? After the COVID-19 pandemic, when there were lockdowns, and during those the early months of 2020, the prices of airline tickets were virtually impossible to track because there wasn't a market for the product. There were too many restrictions on travel between countries and also domestically. And once they began to release or to free those travel restrictions, we began to look at the prices. But this new stage or phase of airline tickets, we began to see high volatility in the product's prices that drew a lot of attention from market analysts. There was a high level of questioning because there's this weight of volatility, and the method that we're using right now, or the technique is now, they used to do contrast, which was the common practice in the past. That was because of the situation and the fact that we had web scraping on hand that was being developed, we decided to conduct a pilot project gathering prices of airline tickets using web scraping for two purposes. We wanted to see a higher volume than we can get using people within the institution. And number two, the second objective was to be able to collate different methods for data gathering, methods for analyzing and computing prices, and also the variations in prices for airline tickets. We're currently dealing with the theory of price indexes. We use this through a purchase method, that is, prices are considered at the moment that you're getting a quote. Once you purchase the ticket, then the quote becomes active, and we wanted to test some alternatives that we have been looking at within Eurostat, which focused on use. Basically, what this does is it does future quotes and it accrues prices along the months that they get those quotes. That is, if today I get a price for a flight for September, October, December, the prices will become accrued, and then we'll do that computation using this data. So what we wanted to do was first we had the prices, and these are the various methodological options were designed to see whether there were any changes or impacts in the way that we were gauging or measuring those prices. Again, something very basic. Web scraping is done on websites. Usually it's HTML language, and this is basically structured in the way that you get the information and then you use different branches, and these different branches give different information that you can locate and select to see what it is that you want to capture from it. At the NSO, what we use to do this web scraping is Python, mainly because it's so versatile. The language is so versatile when it comes to program different routines. And using Python, we also decided to use the Selenium package that lets you use a number of specific tools. And Python makes different packages available, and both the experience of the programmer, it might be that they have a specific package that they like best, but the tools change from package to package, and some let you do different things. So when we decided to pick Selenium, we also tested a number of HTML tools and web scraping tools. So we decided to refine this using Selenium. Yeah, the algorithm, it does open up a website through the URL. It automatically extracts the structured data based on patterns, and it summarizes, stores, evaluates, and combines the extracted data. I say that we use this separately using the same logic for both domestic and international flights that do not require any changes, although each company or each company that you want to do web scraping on have different tools on the websites, and you need to do or make some changes depending on the company in order to ensure that the program will work properly. The basic structure for the algorithm is still the same. It remains unchanged. And what we determined after each web scraping was the search sheet and the dates of the flights and the destinations that we wanted to select. In the case of international and domestic flights, we search for different dates and destinations. Basically, as I mentioned in the beginning, we did this in order to track changes and the impacts of different techniques and different approaches. In this specific case, use purchases, and we tracked the evolution of the program. It took our team approximately 2 months in order to properly design and execute and run the program because they had to refine it as they went
Es la interacción con el sitio web.
and they had to learn how to extract this information from each specific website. Okay, the results that we've gotten have led to a reflection. This is based on 200,000 monthly observations of prices for both international and domestic flights. This used to be unimaginable in the past when we were doing using manual techniques. And the scripts would be run initially in the early morning hours. It would take approximately 2 hours for international flights and 1 hour for domestic flights. The fact that we used to do this in the wee hours of the morning was that we were doing a test period, and we one of the things that is preferable is that as you're running the script for the web scraping, you shouldn't be doing any additional tasks or carrying out any additional tasks, as it would be problematic. As far as the execution, as I mentioned, was something very quick. 2 hours for international flights, 1 hour for domestic flights, and the resulting files would be exported to CSV format and structured as follows. You can see that on the screen. You have the flight time, flight date, departure, time and date, return date, the airport, the price, also a timestamp for capturing information. Well, based on this information, the price register density that we got has enabled us to conduct a number of exercises by testing different approaches and different methodological options in order to conduct a more robust analysis. Of course, we've conducted a number of analysis so far, which have enabled us to identify different specific phenomena in the market, which will let us introduce improvements when computing that index. What you see on this slide, this is a specific presentation that we provided to an expert committee, that is, individuals who have lots of knowledge of price indexes. They have lots of training on this, not only people from the banking industry and other institutions. And in June of this year, we presented the early results dealing with an alternative method, which was a purchase method that used different moments for getting the prices. That is by expanding the horizon. Now, we get the prices at least 2 months in advance for international flights. And for domestic flights, 1 month in advance, we were able to provide an alternative technique. Sometimes we would look into 4 or 5 months into the future. What we do basically is we see the patterns for these different techniques. We call this B level purchases, and this has to do with the price variations. It has proven quite interesting. We've had lots of conversations on this aspect, and we've gotten, of course, a lot of surprises because at the end of the day, what we found less variables in was when we had less variables into the future, when we got good footage. And now by going directly to the execution of the web scraping, not so much the theory, some of the challenges that we found, first of all, many things can go wrong. Clearly, the internet connection, or you have power outages. This is not something that you see too often, but it can happen. Sometimes you get computer problems, unexpected changes on the websites. Sometimes they do constant maintenance of the execution script. And also, sometimes you get IP blockages because they're doing this to prevent web scraping. This is something that also needs to be taken into consideration. The solutions that we found was to continually implement elimination of cookies on websites, cleanup processes. You need to daily review the outages at CSV of the scripts. And as for blockages, which is something common when you're doing unauthorized web scraping, and when web scraping activities have not been agreed, one solution was to simulate the web scraping as it were manual. That is to say, you increase the collection times and you simulate the updates in the websites that you search. However, the best option here, what we're doing, is we already have an agreement with one of the companies that provided us with access to their API in order for us to have access to that information without any problem. So once you test the method, the technique, and you get the results, at least you can start a formal conversation with the company in order to be able to directly gather the information or whether they want to update their IP address. As for the next steps, calculation algorithms are put to the test. We need to continue working with the outreach with companies. You need to compare the patterns of the official series, or the official set, with the results of the information that comes from the web scraping. And you need to develop operating protocols. Ready, 10 seconds more than that had been mentioned on the exploration of web scraping for statistics in Brazil. So, Vladimir, you have the floor. Thank you. Now, can you see the presentation? Yes, we can. Although, can you expand it a little bit? Thank you. How about now? Okay, now we can see it. It's clear. Thank you, Vladimir and Lincoln. Okay, sorry for this inconvenience. Thank you, Freddy, for the invitation, and thank you, Andrea. I'm going to share my presentation to speak a little bit about our experience using web scraping for producing price statistics in Brazil. And so, very quickly, just I would like to say that scrapers are very useful tools to get data from websites in an automatic fashion, and how, just as my colleague from Chile said, there are different applications that you can use for price statistics. The various challenges can take place depending on the desired app. Now, as our colleague just said, there are a number of important items, such as selecting a sector of the price basket, and you need to choose the websites for extracting the variables. You need to build and monitor the scraper's result, and you need to conduct a number of surveys concerning the results and or survey and develop new methodologies. The integration of the CPI is also another important point. So this means that the integration with the PCI is a significant point. You need to integrate all kinds of alternative sources. You need to deal with different application methods for applying the structure of the PCI, for example, the geographical scope, and the sources and the weights of the structures that is being used. We're going to talk a little bit about some cases that have been under exploration here in Brazil very quickly. So here we see our CPI. The idea is to have some support from the evaluation of process of the services basket. This information is based on the household budget survey, and this information has been aggregated based on this. You see the most representative items of the classification system. You see the groups, the subgroups. That's where you get the prices. These separate baskets, of course, change in different parts of Brazil, and you have the indicators for the different levels for each state, and they're dealt with on a monthly basis. And so, for the case of our study, we've been dealing with different sectors. You see them in the chart. These are interesting because they are part of this problem that we're dealing with involving the airlines. And here you see the sub-item, which is the new vehicles, used vehicles, airlines, hotels, transportation, app transportation systems, and car rentals. So we've been searching the website. So we're going to be dealing with two cases, new cars and airlines. In blue, you see the ones that we've been implementing. And we're also going to be dealing with two web scraping apps that we've been using at the NSO. So the first case for the survey on vehicles, the idea here was to see that we integrated the results of the scraper using a dashboard that will let the analysis teams and the field teams to start using the information from web scraping more quickly. But we're also examining new methodologies. So the idea for this is to have a tool that will also enable us to refine the analysis, exporting the results, and the website data that are being collected manually. And so on the screen, you see we're doing collections. This is from a company that sells both new and used vehicles. You can see here that we have information on the size of the files. We've collected the prices, the models, the kinds of variables that we're collecting. So this kind of information can also be supported as time goes by to see what is changing, and if you see any significant changes, it might be a signal that you're finding or running into problems, because you see the pattern of the data, so the teams can support this and help with the monitoring process. And so we can also move forward and support the results that have been collected and collate them with the different departments or areas. Here we see the number of cities and states that have information that has been collected over different days. We can compare the number of observations for different states. And here, on the upper part of your screen, you see the prices for a specific vehicle model in a specific area, and we can compare the prices overall prices, and on the right, we can verify how the sample drops over time. This is for a new car. What we see here is that this car is coming out of the line, so they would need to be reassessed at some point. The lower part of your screen, you see the monthly variations of the prices. You see the 5 lowest prices, and you can also see the evolution of the prices in this case. Okay, we can also support different results, different indicators for our total, and also see the evolution of the size of the sample for both new and used vehicles. And finally, it is also possible to mention the separate collections for each price for each kind of vehicle, whether new vehicles, used vehicles, and this lets you make more accurate analysis, and this is also good for the collection teams. A second case that I'm going to deal with very quickly, here in Brazil, when we do or make an expenditure on the market, we typically get an invoice for our purchase. You see the total here, and if you scan out this information, you can see this on the web, and this comes from information that provided by the fiscal authorities, by the tax authorities. So this is a very rich database that we still do not have access to, but we've been able to collect some of these and do a scraping in order to better understand the variables that are available on this database and their potential. In here, you can see this is a wealth of information that you can find: the product, the goods, the number, the amount, the quantity, the codes for the register, for the cashiers. So this can provide you with one of these charts, and you get this set of data. So this has high potential for use, and the set of data that you get based on this information can be used for deriving individual or separate expenditures by individuals. So you can use this information to see the expenditure based on item code. This is a specific store. The also a wealth of information on the apps that every store uses, and you can get geographical information as well, and you can see the location of the individuals that make the purchases. And this can be used to further learn about household budget or household expenditures, because sometimes people in households need to provide this information, but sometimes it becomes confusing for people because this information needs to be dealt with manually and then coded. This process has the potential to enhance all of these operations. So I will close now and give the floor to my colleague. Good morning, my name is Lincoln, and I'm going to be speaking about other cases of use of alternative sources for dealing with the consumer price indexes at the NSO. We've been using web scraping tools for a few years. The purpose was to replace manual operations without changing the methodology. The airline ticket trade is reviewed over 1 year periods, and we've been able to get information from airline websites. To your left, data on prices and further information that you see on the screen is from their website, and you have information available from 4 different companies, from 4 different airlines. You can extract this data using a robot, and then you collect all of the round trip prices and all rates. In general, these websites are dynamic, so the robot needs to emulate human behavior by logging on to the airline's website, looking for origins and destinations, and this is based on the consumer price index on specific dates because these are dynamic. The product that we used was the Selenium and R tools. The index that was computed manually, both manually and automatically, are basically the same, but this automated method further reduced the times. For this, we use a similar methodology for collecting airline ticket information. Next, please. The CPI involves a full product catalog in order to compare prices of goods and services between 2 countries. So the use of web scraping can help in collecting prices for a number of items. Okay, product or item collection takes place within aggregator's website, and you get a description on the search box, and you get all of the results available in. Next. For example, for this item, this is a dishwasher detergent. So the search box contains the following description: the brand, the minimum quantity, the maximum quantity. You do the search and you keep and store all the potential results to see whether the items are eligible or not. Next. Okay, after the collection has been completed, the prices are made critical to identify the eligible products, items, and the description. As you see, the products, including this description, some are eliminated because the last 3 lines on this chart, you can see that you see the words packed and kit, and in this case, we use these words to solve the problem. Okay, web scraping is a versatile tool that can be used for different applications, such as airline tickets and vehicles, motor vehicles, and we use electronic invoices. The integration of the data on the dashboard allows for better control of scrapers and an easier use for analysis teams. The collection of data for airline tickets to replace manual collection has been proven very useful for the teams that work on the ground, the field. I'd like to thank my colleagues that helped me to gather all of these information for these projects and for this presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Vladimir and Lincoln.
Samaniego y Gastón
Next
Presto.
presentation is by Ana Sofia and Gaston from Uruguay.
Presentar, no sé si estoy compartiendo la
Thank you
pantalla.
for the invitation. Could you please share your screen?
Bueno, vamos a hablar de las experiencias de línea.
Okay, we're going to talk about the experiences of the Uruguays and SO, both using web scraping and API. We're going to go very quickly because we need to deal with two cases. The idea is that during the automatic extraction from the website from prices and attributes included in the basket, we deal with the consumer price index, but we aim not only to collect information, but to carry out many different tasks. I had an introduction of the CPI, but it's no longer necessary. So that you see that this is a brand new basket that we've been using since October 2022. We made a large methodology change. This has been a large operation. We collect information from 3,500 businesses. We use 3 different baskets with the specific indexes. The idea is that we collect prices in 3 different ways: data collection, in person with surveyors in the field. They go to large stores, so we get a plain file. Data is stored in a chart, and we compute the index looking at consumption. This data that has been saved in the Oracle chart is not going to be used as the base for calculation. The 2 case studies that we're going to look at, one is airline tickets. This is an item, a web scraping that is underway. It started before the new database was started, and it's used, web scraping is used in order to get the prices and the attributes of airline tickets. And the other case study that we're going to be dealing with is technology items or products. This is actually not underway yet. It's still undergoing the study phase, but it's designed to be used with the Mercado Libre website using the different attributes to identify it. We do single factoring in order to adjust the prices. In this case, we tested 2 different alternatives: web scraping and API access. Back to the flights, to the airline tickets, the problem is, I believe both my colleagues before me, my colleagues from Chile and Brazil, also discussed this, and I congratulate you for your presentation. But the inputs, we used to get them manually by manual scraping the airlines websites, but it would be very time consuming, and the number of prices were fairly low, the number of prices that would be able to collect. Now we're dealing with a solution. This is an automated collection program, a price collection program. It is web-based and lets you collect many more prices in much less time. So this interaction lets you use less human resources. As for the methodology for the airline tickets and how you get to that result, you get 6 destinations: Buenos Aires, Sao Paulo, Santiago. You can see them on the screen: New York, Madrid. 2 departure dates, either 30 days or 60 days. After a total of 12 searches, we have a round trip, 1 month between the departure date and the return date. This is for 1 individual, E-class ticket, and 1 carry-on, and 7 variables: city of destination, airline, days in advance, day of the week for the return, number of stopovers. And then the geometric averages, weighted averages for each airline gives you the information. For this task, use the R software and R Selenium. The R program runs the server Selenium on Java. The Chrome driver is used for interacting with the website. So you need to set the date, departure date, destination. If you want several different things, luggage. You need to start interacting with the websites. You use the Chromium tool, and the data are processed on our database. And I was saying there were 3 different ways to gather the data. And this is the 4th way, through web scraping. You process the data on R, and you do the connection with the Oracle database with the libraries. And this is a 4th way, a 4th technique for storing data. After that, once you run the calculation, we also did part of the monitoring and validation with a Shine app. Was maybe not as perfect as Vladimir showed, but depending on the kind of trip, this is for internal use. And here you can see it. To your right, you see airline numbers, the number of non-stop trips, 30 days in advance. We're going to see the variations. We're going to use August as the month. Price increases in the previous month, average price, how many prices, average price, and the different days of the week. LATAM airline, non-stop flights, 60 days. Same thing here. And here we have an idea of what is going on. This is the app. And I will let Anna deal with the next problem. Okay, now what we're going to see, we're going to look at technology items. It's rather different from the one that created the web scraping for flights. The problem is that the consistent progress of ITC's technology companies and technology designs is moving forward. The features, the quality, and therefore the price will change at great speed, thereby making conventional methodologies unable to accurately reflect the single price variation within the transition period. The solution is through hedonic adjustment of the prices. And to this end, it is necessary to identify how the quality change has an impact on the price through a statistic model. To this end, it is necessary to leave the data in a massive fashion. So in order to automatically replace the data, high volumes of data, we need to have access to the Mercado Libre website. Mercado Libre has one good thing about it, which is that they have an app that makes it possible for us to work in 2 ways, to access in 2 ways, either through web scraping or through an API. So part of the process for the analysis of this information, for comparing or looking at the pros and cons of each method is as follows. However, before making this comparison, the process, whichever it is, whether it's the same. So first, we start by relieving the data. We create the platform and the programming language that we're going to be using, which axis we select. After pre-processing the data, we set the model, and then we make a comparison designed to unify the variables that we've identified for the model with the model available for this relief. So the first thing that we did was to compare both methodologies and to state the pros and the cons of each methodology. On the one hand, for the pros for web scraping is that it uses R. It is extended within our NSO, not so much Python. So it is a plus when it comes to maintenance. The second thing is that is free and you can download any kind of data that you find on the web. The cons, as my colleague has said, is that any changes in the web design for the page make it necessary to change the programming. So it needs subsequent programming and maintenance. You cannot prevent MELI blockings, and the website also has an impact on data downloads. As for API, the pros is that it usually undergoes less changes than web page design, website design, and they frequently release all of the changes made to the website. So it's very easy to work with. Now the cons are, and one very good thing is that it is free, but it restricts the amount of data that you can download on a daily basis. On the other hand, the con is that you download more registers. The idea that led to this decision was that at some point you can make some sort of an agreement with the website's owners, and they will provide you with access as a developer, and then you will be able to download more data. And although we've gone through the pre-processing and the comparisons of the entire system and we chose the API, we still made the exercise of using web scraping. So in this case, the web scraping using our Selenium, on the one hand, we used a function which is to extract data, and then after that, there are two that are part of this function. What this function does, it goes through each item and it extracts the following data: the current price. As a result, you get a data frame. It is the example that you see on the lower part of your screen to the right. And actually, we use this for cell phones and personal computers. And then you have number two, the API. We use the Python programming language for access. This is the Spider development site. What we did in some was we created an app on Meli for the Mercado Libre website. Then we got the access data. And once you have the permission to access, then you start downloading the data. There are different levels, and you need to spend some time until you get to the level of disaggregation that you require. There are different categories and subcategories, and then you get the items. And finally, you save the data, the outputs in a server, and then you process it using R, because this is the use of R is much more expanded, much more scattered. So this is an example of a notebook on the download process and the data that you manage to download from this app, the attributes, part of all of the attributes that you get. And this, of course, there are many, there's a great difference when you're using the free version. This is what we did with the final data that we downloaded. You unify the currencies, the weight measures. There are certain variables that we needed to identify that had not been included. And we had to extract many of these, or we had to cross some of this information using web-based information such as the RAM, the hard disk, and the type of hard disk. So this is information that you extract from the title, and in the case of the processor speed, you get a benchmark that its speed rate will give you. So finally, you get the model. This is still being tested, and this relates the final price with the speed of the processor, the RAM weight, the hard disk, whether solid state or mechanic. So based on this model, you get a before and an after the quality variation, and you get a single factoring that will let you adjust the price for these kinds of items. Finally, these are the pending tasks for technology items. You need to create consensus on the attributes that are being released. You need to improve the data extraction through API. The fact is that they should be panel-based data, different items, different times, points in time, and this can have an impact on the weights that each attribute will have on the price. What we did was to relieve this data a period of time. This is not ideal because this will have an impact on the time, but we did this by thinking that at some point we will be able to make a larger amount of data available once we are able to enter into some sort of an agreement with the website, some sort of option that will allow us to download more data from the Mercado Libre website. One more challenge has to do with the computers, because they are usually offered through promotions. They will give you a chair or a mouse or something like that. So it's hard to actually identify the exact price of the item or the device. And as for airline tickets, there's one pending task, which is to extend the use of R and the R Selenium library to IPC technicians or consumer price index technicians in order for them to do maintenance to the program. Also, we have other projects in line, such as working with Uber. Thank you for providing us with the vision that you have and the challenges that you've met. I believe that the presentation from Chile, Brazil, and Uruguay also showed this cross-cutting core, because all three of them have focused on transportation and airline tickets, and they're also trying to provide some innovation. Are there any additional questions? Please put your questions on the chat, and depending on the time, but we will try to reply to your questions. Let me start with a question for Christian, which is, how long do you keep the price history? If it's 200,000 in 5 years, it would be millions and millions stored just for one single website. So how about storage, and for how long do you store that data? Thank you, Freddy. Okay, because this is a process which is still in the pilot stage. We've been dealing with lots of information since last year, but it's not such a crucial issue from the standpoint of data. We're talking about 300 megabytes. So, of course, we do have to store lots of information, but now based on the cost of storage, it's quite cheap. So it's not an issue involving cost, but rather the regulations in place if in each country. So how much information can you actually store? Thank you, Christian. Hopefully we've addressed Carol's question. I'm sorry, Jorge's question. For Brazil, in this case, Vladimir and Lincoln, we have a question on what is the best tool in terms of Python R. Of course, this question can also be asked to our colleagues from Chile and Uruguay, but specifically in the case of Brazil, what was the decision or the cases that you dealt with before choosing one? Well, let me talk a little bit about that. I believe that the tool is not the most important thing. Using the tool that you are actually used to using, with our Selenium. So the best thing is to stay with our Selenium. There are a number of apps that we use. Some of us use Python in some cases. Python is best for some cases, but I don't think that's the actual fact of the matter, the kind of tool that you're going to be using. Thank you. Vladimir, would you like to expand? I do agree with Lincoln. For some apps, Python might prove a bit easier to use. Perfect. Thank you, Lincoln and Vladimir. So tools are a mechanism, but not the only issue. So we can ask the same question to the other two countries. Here I have a couple of questions for Uruguay. I believe that they've been addressed. The first one is preparing the methodology scheme for gathering information. How long did it take? Because you have a team fully dedicated to work on web scraping, and what is the kind of what kind of training does your team get? For Gaston and Anna, please. Well, we do not have a team exclusively devoted to web scraping. This is part of the team's work, the methodology. After, how long did it take? Actually, we have no idea. It wasn't too long, quite a short time. And as far as training, we had provided a course with Brazil's NSO. Vladimir and Lincoln both attended on the use of our Selenium. And the rest is a training that we've provided here. It didn't take long. I remember that the project was already in place, but there were other ways of dealing with data. So the webpack provider And then I realized that it was I who had to keep working on the project. So I don't know if Anna wants to add anything. No, I'd just like to say that actually this web scraping project, as Gaston just said, I'm talking from my experience, and it didn't take that long. But the thing that required more work was the standardization of the websites, but it shouldn't take that long. And after API, the actual requirement is to learn more about the different techniques that let you deal with data. So that is the different conditions on each website. But it's rather the previous time for analysis that you need to spend. Thank you, Gaston. And I have a couple of questions that we're going to address. We're going to start with Brazil, and then Chile and Uruguay will follow. 1 minute, because we have 5 minutes left. The first one, how do you go around anti-bot systems, and how do you move forward faster with web scraping? And the next one is, what is the monitoring process like? It's breaking up. How do you deal with changes on the websites, changes to the websites that have an impact on the information capture? You have a minute. Okay. How to avoid anti-bot systems? First, you should get in contact with the website in order to get their permission to download data. However, there are a number of good policies trying to avoid mass collections. You need to provide enough time between collections. As far as moving forward faster with web scraping, you can try to use tools such as Scrapey or different things of this kind in order to undertake simultaneous processes. Lincoln, would you like to say anything? No. Great, thank you. I see Lincoln saying no. Okay, let us go to Christian in Chile so that he can answer both questions. Yes, thank you, Freddy. One comment. I do agree with my colleagues from Brazil on how to pick the tool, basically, which is more widely used by the programs. Not a big difference. About web scraping, how to avoid banning, we've tested different alternatives. One is to rather simulate, let the robot simulate an individual, so it's a slow process, but it's also more difficult for the website to detect the robot downloading the information, although this takes longer. And of course, on the other hand, if you want to find a quicker solution, as Vladimir said, you can get the permission. There can be an alternative. Thank you, Christian, and finally, Anna and Gaston. Thank you. I haven't had many issues, but I had dealt with the program simulating a human trying to download the information. So that wouldn't be the Chrome driver. And simulating that it was a human, so I had no problem with that. Or any robot detection mechanism, and actually the way to select each flight, the way that I did arrange this was the program would go onto the main website and try to find the first flight. And because I had selected the attributes, the only thing that changed was the destination. After that, once I had all of the destinations, I would change the departure date and the arrival date. So I already had those flights. So the scraping that we were using only took 10 minutes. And as people do this, they are busy doing other things on their computer. So they don't have to do anything else. They just run this on a daily basis. They do this during office hours, but usually before noon. They just need to set a specific time. So we've had no issues with this. Thank you, Gaston. Okay, we're out of time. We need to wrap up. Hopefully it's been useful. I know that there are still many questions to be answered, so we need to provide some follow-up. It's been good to share experiences, and of course, this leads to a number of questions, and you can continue to address these questions with your colleagues from other countries. We have a message from Mexico. Hopefully, we will learn much more about other experiences taking place in the region. Last webinar we had Mexico, so hopefully we will continue to open up new spaces. Thank you all for presenting, Christian, Vladimir, Lincoln, Andrea, and everyone who was behind all this process at ECLAC, Chile. Thank you for helping us to disseminate all of these possibilities for sharing experiences with the different countries and for helping us to learn about other experiences elsewhere. Thank you. Have a good day. Have a good evening. There's a message posted on the festival. Hopefully you will be able to be with us in 6 weeks. Thank you.
Gracias a Jorge por la